Previously on the Fan of History, Greek colonization is getting started and the Assyrian Empire is crumbling. So, what happened in the 750s BC? Well, I'll tell you. But I'm just a fan of history and not a historian, so please tell me if you think something is wrong and we'll talk about it and maybe I can learn more. The most powerful king in the Western world is Sarduri II, ruling Urartu as its 7th king. And to the south of him is the Assyrian Empire, with its weakest king ever. Shamshi-Ilu, the Tutano, controls the northern Assyrian army and tries to keep Urartu out, but it's getting harder and harder. And there will soon be a showdown between Urartu and Assyria, and it could very well be the death of the Assyrian Empire. Nabu-shuma-iskhun is the king of Babylon. He seems to have been a weak and useless king. And we have a source, it's from Nabu-shuma-imbi, the governor of Borsippa, and I like to quote what he says about his king Nabu-shuma-iskhun. Disturbances, disorder, revolt and turmoil occurred in Borsippa, the city of truth and justice, during the reign of King Nabu-shuma-iskhun, the Decurian, the Babylonians, the Borsippians, all the Chaldeans, the Arameans and the people of Dilbat sharpened their weapons for many days to fight with one another and slew one another. Moreover, they fought with the Borsippians over their fields. And we know that in 756 BC, the cult figure of Borsippa's god Nabu, yes, that Nabu, the scribe of the gods, was prevented from going on his New Year journey by all the fighting in the streets. I think I have to talk about the Cimmerian New Year ritual, which exists in both Assyria and Babylon at some point. But it seems the previous king, Reba Marduk, did not really restore the foundations of the land. Babylon is really weak and Nabu-shuma-iskhun is not helping. In 753 BC, there were no little children being suckled by wolves, they didn't build a city, didn't murder each other. There was, as I said, back in the 10th century BC, already a Latin settlement on the Palatine Hill. Romulus, Tullius Stilius, Ancus Marius, and even my favorite Roman king, Numa Pompilius. They are all mythical figures. I'm sorry, but Rome will enter our narrative as an Etruscan city ruled by Lucius Tarquinius Priscus in 616 BC. We are dealing with history here and not with legends. I thought maybe I would do a video about the Remus and Romulus and Remus legend, but then I found that there are plenty on YouTube and it's just kind of stupid, all of it, so I decided not to do it. But if you really want to, please request me to make a Legends of Rome video, but yeah, that's something I'm not really keen on, but if enough patrons want me to do it, tell me. In 752 BC, Sarduri II campaigns to the southeast. He is in Babylon Baroata. He invades Urme for the 3rd time while mounting a campaign in Etuini. He's taking numerous prisoners and booty, and Assyria isn't even resisting him. He's probably fighting the Manians for control of Lake Urmia. But despite all of this, the Manians have been receiving Assyrian beatings and fighting with Urartu for a lot of, but they're still growing more powerful. And I can't really understand this. Around Lake Urmia, there are 3 powerful kingdoms, and they are all getting more powerful. Oh, the Assyrians are not. So maybe everyone is taking things from the Assyrians. We'll talk more about the Manians in the 710s BC, because that's when their kingdom is at most powerful. And this is all happening then in the northern Zagros Mountains, in what is today the border area between Iraq and Iran. In 752 BC, we have a sign that Shamshi-Ilu is still the powerful Tutano, because he is the eponym in the Eponym Chronicle. He's the noble for which this year is named. This guy just never goes away. The king is staying in the land because Urartu V isn't doing anything. It's unclear if he even left the capital while he was the king. But Shamshi-Ilu is 4 kings in and is still going strong. He is ruling Assyria from Kar Shalmaneser, the old Aramean capital in the north. There were probably images of Shamshi-Ilu. It's very likely that Assyria was filled with them, but they're all gone. So what happened to the images? Well, the aging field marshal is about to run into the Assyrian. In 752 BC, we also have the 7th Olympiad. And it's at this Olympiad that tradition says that they made the olive leaf wreath as the victory prize for the winner. This was on advice of the oracle at Delphi, who is now growing more and more powerful. I like to tell you a story. I don't know from which early Olympiad it is from, but it's I like it, so I'll tell you. It's the Olympiad. People are sitting down to watch the games, and the games is still just one race. It's over in very, very short time. But people are sitting down to watch the race, and it's pretty crowded. The benches are filled, and an old man is late. So this old man has difficulty walking, and he really needs to sit down, but there's no place to sit down. So he walks around, he walks to the Athenians, but they're not giving him a place to sit. The Corinthians, everybody is refusing him. But then finally he comes to the Spartans, and the Spartans get up and give this old man a place to sit. And then the old man addresses the assembly and says, "Every Greek knows what is the right thing to do, but only the Spartans do it." And that will be telling in the coming years of the Greek history, because the Spartans will always be the most conservative and the most honorable of the Greeks. But more about that later. In 751 BC, the king of Judah, Uzziah, gets sick with leprosy. And according to the Bible, it's because of his many sins against Yahweh, but the Bible says a lot of strange things. So Uzziah has to become isolated. He goes to live in a separate house or even in a cave. I like the image of the king sitting in a cave. But he's still the king. Somebody, he or the youth, makes his son Jotham the co-regent. But then Jotham has to go to the cave to get advice from his dad. This is a very sad turn in the last years of the prosperous and good reign of Uzziah of Judah. In 750 BC, Sarduri II campaigns to the north. He marches along the Kars Adrahan road against the Kulkai. Kulkai is ruled by Kakani, the king of Kush-Kakalaki. Kulkai is the unconquered territory long known to the Greeks as Colchis, the land of the fabled Golden Fleece. And Colchis has been bearing Urartian access to the Black Sea and its valuable trade routes, so now Sarduri II has access to the Black Sea. And it might be at this time that Urartu first comes into contact with a whole new enemy, something that the Near East hasn't seen for a long, long time. It's the steppe nomads, the Scythians and the Cimmerians. These are steppe nomads hanging out to the north of the Caucasus. The sources are even weaker than usual when it comes to the steppe nomads. Events are extremely hard to date. They of course didn't have writing. Also the term Scythian is very, very unclear. It's applied during the centuries to totally different groups of people. The term Cimmerian is a little clearer, and we'll talk more about that. But they are both probably Indo-European peoples. And the Scythians are applying pressure to the Cimmerians and intend to take over their pastures. The Scythians are more powerful and numerous, and you should ignore the map to the right. It is not a spoiler. But let's meet the Cimmerians and leave the Scythians for the 7th century BC. These are the Cimmerians. Okay, they are not Conan, but they are identified with the catacomb culture. It's an archaeological culture to the north of the Black Sea. There are apparently two tastes of Cimmerians. There are two different sorts of Cimmerians. And according to Herodotus, they are equal in numbers. They are the royal race and the Cimmerian people. There may have been some antagonism between them. They might be fighting each other and hating each other. And they have not blended into a single nation by the end of the 2nd millennium BC. There is a suggestion that the royal race is linked to the Median line of the early Western Iranians, and that they imposed themselves on the Cimmerian, on the catacomb people in the 13th and 12th century BC. So thus the royal Cimmerians are ruled by these guys who come really from Iran, whereas the Cimmerian people are not. The home area of the Cimmerians are the North Pontic steppes east of the Dnieper River and the Crimea itself. And the Cimmerians then, if the people that Sarduri II encounters were Cimmerians, they were just the vanguard of the Cimmerian invasion. They might have arrived in the Caucasus region already around 1200 BC and mingled with the Koban culture. Eusebius dates this sort of preliminary invasion to 1076 BC, but there's a lot of margin of error on that date. The Urartian sources mention a strange people called the Ishki-Gulu living in Armenia in 774 BC. But we will have to wait until the 710s before all the Cimmerians comes calling. We'll talk more about them then. Okay, off to the main topic of this show, Greek writing. Right before 1000 BC, there is the Phoenician alphabet of 22 letters without vocals. We know that Greek writing comes from the Phoenicians. It's a fact. There are a lot of proof for this. The writing that develops in Greece has no similarity to Linear B, which was the writing of the Mycenaeans before the Dark Age. So Greek writing has developed 2 times, entirely different from each other. The similarity in shapes and the names of the letters prove the Phoenician origin, but there are even more proofs. The earliest signs is very unclear. We don't really know when this happened the first time, and 750 BC is a guess that is pretty good, probably. It is possible that the Chians, who fled the Dorian invasion during the Bronze Age collapse to Cyprus, that they never lost writing, but they would then have to relearn writing and ignore their old Linear B writing. But mainland Greece and most of the islands did lose writing during the Dark Age. Here is a picture of the Phoenician alphabet. So, even the oldest Greekest texts show in their letter forms significant differences from Semitic writing. So the alphabet has already changed when it appears. So there is probably an undocumented phase where this writing develops in Greece, so it might be later. But I like to destroy a myth that is very common. We are taught in school that the Greeks introduced vowels into the Phoenician alphabet, but the vowels actually first appear in Syria, and they might have transferred to Greece via the Almina colony. Remember the first Greek colony, Almina, from 825 BC? So whereas the vowels might have had a hard time spreading in Syria, they spread quickly into Greece. So it then would appear that vowels were designed in Greece, but they weren't. There is a bronze bowl with inscriptions in Phoenician letters in Crete. It's dated to somewhere between 950 to 850 BC. And Crete seems to be the first place in Greece with writing then, if you look at that. But then writing disappears in Crete. So it's complicated. But if you ask the Greeks how they learned to write again, they have opinions on it. For example, Stesichorus says that Palamedes invented writing. And Hecataeus of Miletus says that Danaus brought writing to Greece from Egypt, because the Greeks, especially in the 7th century BC, will think that everything old comes from Egypt. But Herodotus is the first Greek that says that the source of Greek writing is the Semitic alphabet of the Phoenicians. He tells a story about Cadmus and his Phoenicians who brought writing when they settled in Thebes. But that is probably not the way that writing arrived in Greece. The Phrygians, which we'll talk more about later, they are in Anatolia. They probably learned writing from the Phoenician as well, and they could have brought it to the Greek world. There is a very similar development of the alphabet in Phrygia as in Greece. Archaic Greek writing has very many different alphabets, so the alphabet is not unified. And the first attempt to do this is in Attica in 403 BC, so you will have 350 years of many different alphabets in Greece. So we now know that the first Greek writing then that we have found is probably from 750 BC. But at any time an earlier object may appear and force us to reconsider here. There is early writing on both sides of the Aegean Sea, so the eastern part, like Miletus, they are not before mainland Greece. The alphabet probably spread. The earliest finds are from 750 to 700 BC. Writing is not widespread in 750 BC, and most of the early writing is from the 7th century. This to the right is the Dipylon jug, and it's tentatively dated to 740 to 730 BC. It contains a graffiti hexameter in bad handwriting. It seems to be a prize offered for the best dancer, presumably at a public festivity. It is very likely that the Greeks wrote a lot of things on leather and papyrus, and these are then all lost. But what did the early Greek texts talk about? Well, there is a great difference compared to Mycenaean texts before the Dark Age. And of course there is a great difference to Mesopotamian texts as well, because they tend to be, this happened, I am so great, I am a shepherd to be wondered at, etc. But the Greek writing is not at all like this. Remember also that in Mycenaean Greece before the Dark Age only the scribes could read. But this new writing with an alphabet is much easier to learn, so more people will be literate, and this will be an important factor for the rise of the power of Greece, as many people in Greece can write. The first inscriptions are public statements. They explain something to reading public. There are owners' names on objects, and then prizes for dance competitions and such like. There are epitaphs about dead people. There are religious dedications, but there is no prose. Nobody tries to tell a story yet. There's also early graffiti that highly personal remarks about individuals, and this is the Nestor's cup. It's also one of the earliest objects with text on it. And the text says, I am Nestor's cup. Whoever drinks from me will have pleasure. And this sounds almost like a joke. In 7th century BC, there will be codified laws, records of public works, and lists of victors in contests. Interstate treaties, they are often on bronze tablets, so they come down to us. But there will also be poetry and epic prose in the 7th century. But there is no history. They don't try to record history before Herodotus, and there are not many bold claims about rulers' greatness. We will talk about the two most important early writers, but it's just a bit early to talk about them yet. And they are of course Homer, who is very hard to date, and Hesiod. But Homer, is he a real person? Where did he come from? Was he really blind? And we'll talk about what we know, and I'm surprised at, normally you hear that Homer was just a legend, etc., but it seems to be a lot of information about the person. So I think that he is as real as Polydorus. We'll talk about Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, probably somewhere in the early 7th century, like the 690s BC episodes. But we also have to mention Hesiod. Hesiod wrote something called Work and Days, and this text is really informative about what life was like at about 700 BC in Greece. He's later than Homer. We'll talk about him probably in the same episode. The Greeks said that there were two writers before these guys, Orpheus and Musaeus, but this is not a course in the history of writing, so we'll not talk about them because Homer and Hesiod are much more important. But before we leave today, we need to talk about one more powerful city-state. And it's Miletus. I already mentioned it several times. It's in Turkey. It's on the eastern Ionian coast. And it could be the biggest Greek city-state of this time. It's probably not as big as and powerful and influential as the Euboean cities, such as Chalcis. But it is the biggest and wealthiest city-state right before the Persian invasion in the middle 6th century BC. It is also mentioned in the Hittite records before the Bronze Age collapse, and it used to be a Mycenaean stronghold in the Bronze Age between 1450 and 1100 BC. It was probably destroyed in the 12th century, maybe by the Sea Peoples, or maybe they were the Sea Peoples. But it was resettled during the Dark Age by Ionian Greeks fleeing the Dorians. And the legend says it that the Achaeans, the people coming from mainland Greece, killed the men in Miletus and married the women. Miletus will be an important player in the Lelantine War, which is coming up very soon. It will also be the city that creates the most colonies during the Great Colonization. Pliny the Elder mentions 90 colonies founded by Miletus, and that's extreme. How many colonies have we talked about so far? 2. And there will be 90 more just from this city-state. In China, the spring and autumn period is going on. The nobles are in control. The country is ruled by King Ping, but he doesn't really have any power, and he doesn't have his heavenly armies. This is the Eastern Zhou dynasty, and it will be going on forever until the 3rd century BC. But China is almost lost to us for this century because there is very, very little information. It's much like India or the Olmecs, even though the Chinese have writing. Next time we'll talk about the Assyrian Empire, because there are enemies everywhere threatening Assyria. The country is weak, it is divided, and the reign of Ashur-dan III with the plagues and the civil wars, it will seem like the good old days when we come back to Assyria. Please check out my Facebook page for Fan of History, check out the WordPress site, and please support the show at Patreon. Thank you for watching.